The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found in 2004 that 14% of global greenhouse gas emissions came from agriculture. Methane produced from cows account for 39% of those emissions, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States. One can see that a little over 5% of methane from cows account for global gas emissions. Before one writes that off as an insignificant amount, one should note that according to the EPA, pound for pound, the comparative impact of methane on climate change is over 20 times greater than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. While carbon dioxide accounts for almost 3/4 of global emissions, a small percentage of methane can have a significant effect on climate change because of this. The fact that a molecule of methane, compared to carbon dioxide, has a greater degree of influence on climate change, coupled with the fact that methane does not stay in the atmosphere as long as carbon dioxide, reducing methane emissions has the potential to curb the effect of climate change in the short term. This could prove very important if we are at all remotely close to a tipping point in our climate. A point that once passed could initiate drastic climate change that would be visible within a human timescale. How do we get the large number of people acting in concert necessary to have an influential impact of reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Economics has a simple answer: a carbon tax. In his book, A Question of Balance, Yale economist William Nordhaus says economics teaches us that it is unrealistic to hope that major reductions in emissions can be achieved by hope, trust, responsible citizenship, environmental ethics, or guilt alone. The only way to have major and durable effects on such a large sector for millions of firms and billions of people and trillions of dollars of expenditures is to raise the price of carbon emissions. This can be applied to reduce the significant amount of the greenhouse gas, methane, produced by cows by having a tax on cow ownership. This would cause a leftward shift in supply curves associated with cow products such as meat and dairy, raising the equilibrium price and reducing the quantity demanded. In 2008, the EPA sent out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking seeking public commentary on potential regulatory approaches for controlling greenhouse gas. Later that year, headlines and articles regarding a potential cow tax were all over the media, based primarily off of a Farm Bureau news release that claimed if the EPA implemented any form of broad program tackling livestock greenhouse gas production, a tax could be included in the regulations. Furthermore, they made calculations estimating the cost per head of cattle a tax would cost. The EPA, however, has gone on record multiple times saying that a tax has not and will not be proposed, and that proposing one would not be within the EPA's legal authority. Regardless, the cow tax came back into headlines again in early 2014, following the release of a climate action plan proposed by President Obama. The plan included a voluntary biogas roadmap meant to reduce dairy sector greenhouse gas emissions by 20% in 2020, which brought forth concern whether this was foreshadowing of mandatory measures.
Environmental change from methane can also cause negative effects economically. This can cause regions to lose their comparative advantage, which could also disrupt international trade as well. If the United States does not make any changes to reduce greenhouse gases, it can cost up to 1.36% of the United States GDP. A tax on cow ownership will give incentive to farmers to own less cows, and with less cows, there will be more agricultural land for other crops. According to the International Center for Creativity, Innovation, and Sustainability, currently 70% of our agricultural land is used to sustain our love of meat. The added cost for farmers will trickle down to meat connoisseurs by charging more for their product in order to counterbalance the imposed tax. The increase in costs for farmers and consumers will inadvertently lead them to produce and consume a more sustainable diet and product. The high cost of red meat at grocery stores and restaurants would presumably force people to consume less red meat, go vegetarian, or find protein substitutes such as beans, soy, chicken, or fish. The tax imposed on farmers may be a detriment to farmers and consumers in the short run, but in the long run, it will be beneficial for them and for the environment if red meat consumption declines significantly. Money generated by the cow tax should be directed towards offsetting the price of current technology and to fund further research into cheaper methane capture technology. Though it may be costly to find a better way to capture methane through technology, in the long run, it would be more economically efficient for farmers. According to International Science Times, each cow emits from about 100 to 500 liters of methane a day. Some other technological methods target the biological aspect of bovine methane production with possible positive consequences. The use of alternative feed supplements, different feeding methods, and vaccines against methane-producing microbes have been studied to cut down on methane from the microbes within the cow's gut. Cutting-edge research suggests with the excess energy not being put into converting food into methane, cows could generate more body fat and milk, creating more efficient and productive cow herds.
A cow tax will have a negative ripple effect in many sectors of the economy. Low-income families will be most affected considering the soaring price of beef and dairy products. Alternative forms of protein will just be too expensive, so some lower-class families could suffer from malnutrition. Also, a cow tax could potentially destroy small farmers financially, and many people will lose their jobs and businesses. Since American farmers will face a competitive disadvantage, there will be an increase of importation of beef and dairy products. Consequently, many health risks are associated with importing food due to poor standards of production in other countries. As mentioned earlier, methane emissions from cows is significantly small compared to other contributors of methane. The government could prioritize on reducing the pollution of those bigger factors. Similarly, the government could focus on other policies such as methane capture to mitigate the issue more efficiently. Imposing a cow tax may help reduce methane emissions, but it isn't the most feasible solution. There would be too many negative consequences financially for many farmers, and the risks of importing are just too great.